Galactic Industrial Bureau, Historical Archive. Archive Record 001. Compiled by the Central Archive Department. Classification level, public access. The magnificent, powerful, ever-expanding order we know today did not begin with an empire. It did not begin with war. In fact, for a very long time, nothing began at all. In the oldest star charts, in the most ancient of records, this era carries only one name: the undying silence. Researchers have traced this primordial age as far back as year 3026 before Galactic Standard, a time so distant, so utterly dark, that even its shadows have shadows. It is worth noting, with some amusement, that during this age, a primitive device fell upon a dying, mercury-drenched world once called Earth. Inside it, songs, profanities, images of grinning creatures who called themselves humans, and a message that roughly translated to, "Come find us, here is our address." No one responded. The device was sold for scrap by passing pirates. Now, let us speak of what truly matters. The name, the undying silence, sounds peaceful at first, but historians agree it was one of the most dangerous periods in all of galactic history. Because the silence was not peace. The silence was the absence of discovery. No one had found anyone else. In those ages, thousands of civilizations existed. Some lived on ocean worlds, entire cities built beneath the waves, drawing power from the pull of tides. Some endured in frozen systems so distant from their stars that even midday skies were black. Others built their cities on artificial rings orbiting gas giants, living so long without gravity that their bones grew thin across generations, their bodies no longer able to bear the pull of any other world. And some lived near young, violent stars, bathed in radiation, sheltered only by great walls of energy, pushing the very edge of what existence could withstand. Every one of them looked up at the sky and believed they were alone. None of them knew that their nearest neighbor was only a few light years away. No great wars, no galactic fleets, no vast armies, because there was nothing yet worth fighting over. Each civilization simply lived, extracted its resources, developed its own science, wrote its own history, in complete ignorance of every other. This is why some historians call this era the Age of Lonely Civilizations. But no silence lasts forever. What changed the fate of the galaxy was not a conflict, not an invasion. It was a discovery made by people who had no idea what they had found. According to the archive records, a small research station had been assigned to investigate an unknown energy fluctuation. The station belonged to no great government, no powerful fleet, just a handful of scientists, a few engineers, a collection of aging research vessels. Their days were unremarkable, checking sensor readings in the morning, processing analyses in the afternoon, writing maintenance reports by night. No ambition drove them, no hunger for glory, only a stipend, a duty, and the faint, distant light of a dying star at the edge of the known galaxy. For hundreds of cycles, their names appeared in no official record, because most of what they documented was later destroyed in the events we now call the data fires. What survives: damaged data crystals, fragmented mission logs, and certain audio recordings whose meaning remains, to this day, undeciphered. This is why historians do not call what they found the Great Discovery. They call it something smaller, something quieter: the first trace. Because what was found was not a technology, not a weapon, not a mineral. What was found was a path. The space between stars was not entirely empty. The first signs of what we now call hyperspace corridors were detected on that day. These corridors did not make engines faster. They did not strengthen ships or arm them with new weapons. But they did something far more extraordinary. They made the distance between two stars shorter than anyone had ever thought possible. Shortcuts through infinite space. Unbelievable. At first, no one understood its significance. The civilizations of that age had not even considered leaving their own systems. Historians compare it to this: humans who had never seen an ocean, trying to understand why someone would build a ship. The need wasn't there. The curiosity was. But curiosity alone was not yet powerful enough to change a civilization. History, however, has a way of rewarding the curious. Only a few cycles passed before other research teams began detecting the same energy traces in different star systems. At first, coincidence, then error, then a natural cosmic phenomenon. But as the data accumulated, denial became harder. When the numbers were brought together, the picture was unsettling. The traces appeared not in one system, but in 10, forming geometrically consistent angles across vast distances. The galaxy had been woven through with invisible roads. And those roads, one day, would bind the fates of billions to one another. The galaxy we know today, a civilization of colossal shipyards, endless trade routes, and fleets powerful enough to darken the skies of entire worlds, did not begin with the rise of an empire, nor was it born from war. Strange as it may sound, for a very long time, nothing happened. The oldest surviving star charts and the most ancient archive fragments refer to that forgotten era by only one name: the Age of Undying Silence. According to galactic historians, its origins can be traced back to 3026 BG, before the galactic calendar. There is, however, one rather unusual story hidden inside those ancient archives. An unverified report claims that long ago, a remarkably primitive device from a distant world called Earth crashed onto a dying planet rich in liquid mercury, somewhere near the edge of explored space. The object contained music, a surprising collection of colorful insults, images of smiling creatures who referred to themselves as humans, and a message that essentially said, "Come find us. Here's our address." Naturally, no one took it seriously. The device was eventually sold for scrap by a group of pirates, and disappeared from history. Anyway, that's enough about ancient junk. Let's return to our story. At first glance, the name The Age of Undying Silence sounds peaceful. It wasn't. Modern historians now consider it one of the most dangerous eras in galactic history. Not because civilizations were at war, but because they had not yet found one another. Silence did not mean peace. Silence meant isolation. Most galactic historians refer to the era that followed the first encounter as the birth of fear. Almost overnight, research vessels began to change. Their engines remained exactly the same. Their laboratories were left untouched. Their scientific instruments changed very little, but their hulls became noticeably thicker. Curiously, no official decree ever ordered this transformation. No Ministry of Defense issued a command. No military council demanded stronger armor. Instead, shipyard engineers quietly opened the specifications of the previous design, looked at the armor plating, and simply added another meter. No one told them to. They all arrived at the same conclusion on their own. Because no one could answer a single question. What was waiting out there? Today, historians recognize this quiet decision as the first true military action in galactic history. Not because anyone had fired a weapon. No one had. No civilization had launched an attack. No fleets had clashed. No worlds had fallen. And yet, something entirely new had been born. Defense. For every civilization, it was an unfamiliar idea, an unsettling one. No shots had been fired, but everyone had begun to imagine that one day they might be. And so, fear was born, long before weapons ever were. The oldest observation logs preserve one sentence, repeated again and again across hundreds of cycles. We don't know who they are. Simple words, but every civilization understood what they truly meant. Different star systems, different authors, different languages, different centuries. Yet the same confession appeared in thousands of reports. We don't know who they are. History did not change because weapons suddenly became more powerful. History changed because uncertainty became impossible to ignore. The unknown feeds imagination. Imagination feeds fear. And fear has always traveled faster than truth. One civilization looked at its neighbor and assumed 3 nearby planets must surely be 300. A standard navigation sensor was mistaken for a next-generation photon weapon. A routine mining convoy was interpreted as the opening phase of an invasion. Those assumptions became reports. The reports became military plans. The plans became budgets. Looking back today, it's easy to smile. We know the truth. They didn't. Every unanswered question was filled with the worst possible answer. That is why the first weapon in galactic history was not a cannon, not a missile, not a beam of energy. The first weapon was suspicion. Suspicion redrew borders. Suspicion silenced scientists. Suspicion ended the open exchange of knowledge, and for the very first time, it gave meaning to a new word: ally. Because remaining alone no longer felt safe. Small civilizations began exchanging information with their neighbors. Energy maps were shared. Sensor data was copied. the first joint patrols quietly appeared throughout known space. They were not official militaries, not yet. But for the first time in recorded history, independent fleets were sailing together toward the same objective. Officially, every vessel was still classified as a research ship. But when they returned to their hangars, engineers no longer inspected scientific samples first. They inspected the integrity of the defensive systems. History is rarely changed by legendary heroes. More often, it is shaped by ordinary civilizations simply trying to survive. And the galaxy was about to give them far less time to prepare than anyone had imagined, because silence had come to an end, and across the stars, the first echoes had already begun. When historians examine the oldest surviving records, one discovery continues to puzzle them. The first long-range exploration vessels were developed by completely independent civilizations at almost exactly the same point in history. Even today, no one can fully explain why. The galaxy was unimaginably vast. No civilization knew the others existed. There was no shared scientific network, no common language, no exchange of knowledge. And yet, across countless distant star systems, they all reached the very same conclusion. They had to go farther. They all asked the same question: what lies beyond the horizon? And somehow, without ever speaking to one another, they all ignited their first deep space engines within the same era. Historians now refer to this remarkable phenomenon as the Great Convergence. One of the oldest surviving entries inside the Central Archive originates from an unidentified observation station. The entire report contains only a single sentence: "The sky is no longer as quiet as it used to be." That sentence would later be quoted thousands of times across hundreds of cycles. Because it was true. The sky was changing. There was a time when an entire star system could remain untouched for months. No traffic, no transmissions, no movement. Now, long-range sensors detected something new with every passing cycle. Unknown exploration vessels quietly drifting between the stars. Perhaps the most fascinating detail is that these ships actively avoided one another. If there was one universal law shared by every civilization, it was caution. No one wanted to be seen. No one wanted to introduce themselves first. And above all, no one wanted to become the one who fired the first shot. Looking back today, some historians describe this behavior as wisdom. Others call it restraint, even diplomacy. But the surviving records tell a far simpler story. They were afraid, not only of an enemy, but of being misunderstood. Because no civilization could tell whether an approaching vessel had come to offer peace or declare war. And so, the first diplomatic protocols were not created by diplomats. They were created by engineers. Simple patterns of external lights were mounted onto the hulls of exploration ships. Energy rings blinking at carefully measured frequencies began carrying simple messages. Do not approach. Danger. Observation in progress. Retreating. The sophisticated galactic communication systems we rely on today can trace their origins back to those primitive patterns of light. But there was one problem. Every civilization invented its own symbols. One species believed a particular sequence meant peace. Another interpreted the exact same signal as a military warning. A third assumed it was the opening stage of an attack. The first misunderstandings became the first accidents. The first accidents became the first distrust. And history would prove, again and again, that once trust disappears, weapons never remain far behind. The first weapon ever created was never meant to destroy a ship. It was designed to stop one. Archive records identify this technology as the kinetic Riri interceptor. Its purpose was simple: disable the engines of an approaching vessel without destroying it. But history has taught us one lesson, time and time again. Every defensive technology eventually becomes an offensive one, and the galaxy would prove no different. For centuries, the event we now call the First Contact Crisis was remembered as the beginning of the First Interstellar War. But during the last 200 cycles, newly restored data crystals have revealed a very different story. Two exploration fleets encountered one another entirely by accident. One was conducting an energy survey. The other was measuring gravitational anomalies. Neither fleet had any intention of attacking. Neither captain expected to meet another civilization. But sensor technology in those days was primitive. One fleet's scanning beam was interpreted by the other's defense systems as a weapon lock. Every civilization possessed unique elements, resources found nowhere else in the galaxy. Anything unfamiliar was automatically treated as a potential threat. Then, the first alarm sounded. Recovered flight recordings reveal that the warning sirens became so loud they drowned out the voices of the crews themselves. The commanders could not understand each other's language. The pilots could not understand what the opposing ships were doing. And for several long minutes, the fate of the galaxy waited in complete silence. Official historians often describe those moments as the longest few seconds in galactic history, because no one wanted to fire, but no one wanted to become the first one to be fired upon. Then, everything changed. A small autonomous survey probe drifting between the two fleets lost control after passing through overlapping scanning beams. Within seconds, it spun wildly through space and collided with the outer sensor array of one of the ships. The explosion was tiny. By today's standards, it would barely qualify as an accident report. But no one knew that. All they saw was an explosion. And moments later, an order echoed through the command decks. An order the galaxy had never heard before. Activate defensive systems. Inside the Central Archive, that single moment is remembered by only 3 words. The first flash of light. Who fired first? Even today, no one knows. Both fleets lost their recordings at the exact same second. The surviving data crystals are badly damaged. Mission logs are incomplete. The testimony of those who survived contradicts itself. Some historians believe the first shot was fired accidentally. Others argue an automated defense system activated on its own. And a few still insist that a third, unidentified vessel intervened without ever revealing itself. To this day, the Central Archive has never issued an official conclusion. Perhaps, the first war in galactic history was nothing more than a tragic misunderstanding. Perhaps an impatient commander made a decision that echoed across thousands of years. Or perhaps, history simply remembered a misunderstood alarm as the beginning of a war. What we know with certainty is this: after the first contact crisis, nothing was ever the same again. The two exploration fleets continued on their journeys. Neither side suffered catastrophic losses. The entire confrontation lasted only minutes. By modern standards, it would likely be classified as nothing more than a routine border incident. But history does not measure events by the damage they cause. It measures them by the consequences they leave behind. The first contact crisis taught every civilization the same lesson. They were no longer alone. And once a civilization understands that it is no longer alone, it is never quite as fearless as it once was. In the cycles that followed, star charts began to change. Routes once used solely for scientific exploration were now classified by security level. Some systems were marked low risk, others under observation, and some disappeared from the maps altogether, without explanation. One sentence from the Central Archive has survived from that era. The unknown cannot be erased from the map, only from the minds of those too afraid to seek it. Civilizations were not yet at war, not yet. But every one of them wanted the same advantage: to see farther, to travel faster, to generate more energy. And perhaps to stand one step ahead of the unknown neighbors they knew they would one day meet. The galaxy's first arms race did not begin with weapons. It began with knowledge, with maps, and with the invisible energy corridors that connected the stars. It was during this very era that a new term appeared inside the archives, a term that had never existed before: industrial fleets. At first glance, there was nothing military about them. They carried no weapons, they fought no wars, they defended no borders. Their mission was simple: harvest energy crystals, establish mining colonies, construct production stations in distant systems, and keep the growing network of civilization alive. Nothing more. Or so everyone believed. Looking back today, historians now consider the industrial fleets one of the most important institutions ever created. Because without realizing it, they were laying the very first foundations of the greatest organization the galaxy would ever know. A power that would not be born to conquer the stars, but to connect them. As the cycles passed, ships slowly began to change. Hulls became thicker, energy shields grew stronger, long-range sensors were upgraded. New defensive systems quietly appeared aboard exploration vessels. Official documents described these improvements as nothing more than protective equipment. Modern historians call them something else: the beginning of the first military arms race. No vessel was officially classified as a warship. No fleet referred to itself as a navy. And yet, every new generation of ships was slightly tougher, slightly stronger, slightly more capable than the one before. History rarely changes all at once. More often, it changes one small decision at a time. No one living in that era could have imagined that these humble exploration ships would one day evolve into colossal battle cruisers. No one believed that the industrial fleets would eventually become the single most influential institution in galactic history. Because at the time, they were nothing more than engineers, pilots, cartographers, energy specialists, and ordinary crew members whose names would never be remembered. But before the industrial fleets departed on their first major expeditions, something was already watching them, hidden somewhere beyond the darkness. The archives never reveal who those observers truly were. Some historians believe they belonged to another civilization. Others argue they were isolated colonies, never officially discovered. The more controversial theories suggest something far more unsettling. Perhaps they were never hiding. Perhaps we simply lacked the ability to see them. One question quietly spread through scientific circles. Was there something greater already out there? Attention slowly shifted away from ships themselves. Instead, civilizations began tracking something else. Energy, its movement, its concentration, its flow. Because energy was no longer simply a resource. Energy had become power. The strength of a civilization was no longer measured by population, nor by the number of inhabited worlds, not even by technological achievement alone. True power belonged to those who understood how energy moved across the galaxy. It was during this period that historians first encountered the concept now known as photon energy corridors. Invisible rivers of energy flowing silently between the stars. Some civilizations had unknowingly settled at the heart of these currents. Others survived on little more than the scattered remnants. The future would prove that whoever controlled those corridors would shape the destiny of entire civilizations. Even during times of abundance, civilizations continued competing for the richest systems. Because survival was never the ultimate goal. Power was. Security, prosperity, the ability to guarantee the next 1,000 cycles. And eventually, several of the largest industrial fleets reached exactly the same conclusion. They could no longer succeed alone. Many cosmic historians now argue that the true birth of the Galactic Industrial Bureau did not begin with an official declaration, nor with a signature, nor with a government. Perhaps the Galactic Industrial Bureau was born much earlier. Perhaps it began the moment two exhausted engineers leaned over the same star chart, looked at one another, and quietly admitted, "We can't do this alone anymore." No archive has ever preserved those words. No official record confirms they were ever spoken. But perhaps some institutions are not born through documents. Perhaps they are born out of necessity. During the early years, photon energy corridors existed only inside exploration reports. No civilization believed they could ever be owned. After all, a corridor was simply a route. Routes were meant to be traveled, to be shared. The very idea of claiming ownership over one would have sounded absurd. But that belief would not survive for long. According to the Central Archive, the first major dispute in recorded galactic history was not fought over a planet, nor over a valuable mineral. It began over a passage, a single crossroads. Today, history remembers it as the Pana Corridor Nexus. It was the point where 6 major photon energy corridors converged. Soon, every merchant fleet, every exploration vessel, every industrial convoy found itself passing through the very same system. At first, it created nothing more than heavy traffic. Then, waiting times increased. Soon afterward, energy transfer stations appeared. Storage depots followed. Maintenance shipyards, repair docks. Then came the merchants. Then the housing districts. Then schools. Without anyone planning it, a quiet star system slowly transformed into the busiest crossroads the galaxy had ever known. No government designed it. No empire ordered its construction. The galaxy itself created its own center, drawn together by the gravity of commerce. Economic historians now recognize the Pana Corridor Nexus as the birthplace of the first truly galactic marketplace. For the first time, one civilization purchased components built by another. For the first time, a starship engine operated using an energy core designed by an entirely different species. For the first time, engineers born beneath different stars worked side by side inside the very same shipyard. And, for the first time, the galaxy began to function as a single connected civilization. But every connection comes with a price. As the Pana Corridor Nexus continued to grow, a new question emerged. Who was in charge? Who would determine energy prices? Who would receive maintenance priority? Who would repair damaged corridors? Should a scientific expedition pass first? Or should energy transports receive priority? Today, these questions seem almost ordinary. Back then, no one had answers. Because for the very first time, the galaxy needed common rules. Recovered meeting transcripts from that era paint a picture of organized chaos. Negotiations lasting for days, agreements collapsing within hours, partnerships formed only to dissolve again, threats, arguments, delegates storming out of conference chambers, security teams forced to intervene. No civilization trusted the others, yet none of them were willing to face the endless galaxy alone. It was during this period that another new term entered the archives: the industrial Kanyex convoys. Mining vessels, cargo ships, research expeditions, fuel carriers, construction barges, entire industrial fleets began traveling together as a single convoy, because together they stood a better chance of surviving. At first, only a handful of exploration ships escorted them. Soon, protective vessels joined the formation. Then larger escorts, stronger shields, long-range surveillance ships, and before anyone truly realized what was happening, the galaxy's first organized protection fleets had quietly come into existence. One final detail from the archives has fascinated historians for centuries. The earliest maintenance stations surrounding the Pana Corridor Nexus displayed no national flags, no government insignias, no imperial banners. Above every entrance, only a single symbol appeared: a lone star, surrounded by 6 thin rings, with a small energy core at its center. Today, Almost everyone recognizes that symbol. But at the time, it meant nothing. It was simply the marker of a maintenance station. Only centuries later would historians discover that they had been looking at the earliest form of one of the most powerful institutions the galaxy would ever know. Curiously, symbols are often born before the institutions they represent. Long before people choose a name, they choose a symbol. Perhaps that is the first act of every civilization: to give an idea a shape, and to create something others will one day recognize. From the outside, the prosperity of the Pana Corridor Nexus looked like the perfect target. Yet it was never attacked by an empire. No official navy invaded. No great civilization attempted to seize control. No government declared war over it. The first threat had no name. Today, we would probably call them pirates. But the archives never used that word, because they were not pirates. Not yet. They were opportunists, independent captains, former exploration crews, bankrupt mining companies, discharged escort commanders, and hundreds of forgotten groups that history never bothered to record. They came from different worlds, different backgrounds, different civilizations. Yet they all shared one thing: they answered to no law. No common authority existed to stop them. No unified justice system. No galactic police. Every civilization enforced only its own rules. And beyond those borders, the galaxy belonged to whoever was willing to take. Historians often point out one fascinating detail. The earliest attacks were not carried out for fuel, nor for energy crystals, nor even for valuable minerals. They were carried out for something far more valuable: maps. Because anyone who understood the corridors understood the future. Today, a star chart seems almost ordinary. Back then, it was one of the most valuable possessions a civilization could own. Years of exploration could be compressed into a single data crystal. And that crystal was often worth more than the ship carrying it. Ships grow old. Ships are damaged. Ships are eventually lost. But an accurate map can survive for generations, guiding thousands of vessels and shaping the destiny of millions. More and more exploration ships returned home successfully, only for investigators to discover that their memory archives had been erased. Others lost only a single file: the navigation records of the Pana energy corridors. At first, the incidents were blamed on technical failures, then software corruption, later cosmic radiation. But as the disappearances continued, the truth became impossible to ignore. Someone had realized the value of information long before everyone else, and they were stealing every map they could find. To this day, no one knows who they were. No one knows how many fleets they controlled. No one even knows whether they worked together or independently. The Central Archive has never issued an official conclusion, but historians overwhelmingly agree on one point: the first great fortunes of the galaxy were built not upon gold, not upon minerals, but upon knowledge. In a galaxy this vast, whoever knows the roads can guide the future. The right map could lead a convoy safely around a black hole, through hidden gravitational passages, saving countless lives and months of travel. Sometimes, the shortest route was worth more than an entire fleet. And it was for this reason that the Pana Corridor Nexus made a decision never before seen in recorded history. Exploration maps would no longer be shared openly. The precise coordinates of the energy corridors were encrypted. Access became restricted. And for the first time, exploration vessels traveled under armed escort. Modern historians now refer to this period as the Map Wars. At the time, no one realized history would later remember these events as the beginning of the first Pan-Security Protocol. Perhaps the first true soldier in galactic history was never a celebrated war hero. Perhaps it was nothing more than a quiet escort pilot trying to protect a single data crystal. That is why most military historians now agree the galaxy's first professional security fleets were born during this era. They wore no uniforms, held no ranks, received no medals, but their mission was already clear. Protect the corridors, protect the convoys, and above all, protect the knowledge. Because in the end, the force that would shape the destiny of the galaxy would never be the largest cannon, nor the most powerful energy weapon, nor the mightiest battleship ever constructed. It would be the right map. Because with the right map, you could travel thousands of light years and always find your way home. From that day forward, no exploration fleet operating near the Corridor Nexus would ever travel alone again. At first, it was merely a recommendation. Soon afterward, it became a regional agreement between neighboring civilizations. Eventually, it became law. One of the oldest surviving regulations from that era contains only a single sentence. Discovering a route is not the achievement. Protecting it is. Because the galaxy had become far too dangerous. Too many advanced civilizations. Too many unknown technologies. Too many unanswered questions. The only thing keeping them apart was distance. No one knows who first wrote those words, but their influence endured for centuries. For the first time, discovery came with responsibility. Finding a new corridor was no longer enough. The fleet that discovered it was expected to protect it, to establish the first maintenance stations, to construct emergency rescue platforms, and when necessary, to guarantee safe passage for every fleet that followed. No one realized how revolutionary that idea truly was. For the first time in history, one civilization was building infrastructure not only for itself, but for strangers. Perhaps it wasn't an act of kindness. Perhaps they simply wanted trade to grow. Perhaps they expected greater profits. The motivation no longer mattered. The outcome did. For the first time, the galaxy was beginning to build a shared infrastructure. And throughout history, those who build the infrastructure almost always shape the future. It was just as civilizations were beginning to accept these new responsibilities that disaster struck. The first major convoy bound for the Pana Corridor Nexus never arrived. At first, no one considered it unusual. Long-distance voyages were unpredictable. Energy storms, sensor failures, engine malfunctions. These were simply part of life in deep space. The very first report contained only 4 words. The convoy is overdue. One cycle passed, then another. No energy signatures, no navigation signals. A second fleet was dispatched to search the route. They returned with nothing. No wreckage, no debris, no distress beacon, not even a trace. Eventually, the convoy received a single official designation: missing. Today, history remembers the incident as the lost Pana convoy. Curiously, its cargo was never what made the event important. The convoy carried no energy crystals, no weapons, no rare elements, no precious minerals, not even rhenium. What it carried was knowledge. Unpublished maps of newly discovered corridors, fresh energy surveys, gravitational measurements, and the complete research archive from Station 47. Every piece of it vanished, together. Many historians argue that the first great loss in galactic history was never measured in lives. It was measured in knowledge. Because that convoy carried far more than a crew. It carried a possible future. Some even believe, had those archives reached their destination, the rise of pirates and lawless factions might have been prevented altogether. For hundreds of cycles, the Central Archive investigated the disappearance. Corridors were searched, neighboring systems examined, energy signatures analyzed. Every known possibility was explored. Nothing was ever found. No wreckage, no escape pods, no emergency transmitters, not a single surviving data crystal. Theories multiplied. Some believed the convoy entered the wrong corridor. Others blamed a catastrophic energy surge or the immense gravity of a black hole. Still others insisted that an unknown third party intercepted the convoy long before it reached its destination. No evidence has ever confirmed any of those theories. Only one consequence is beyond dispute. Across the galaxy, every civilization began asking the very same question: are the maps truly safe? It sounds like a simple question. It wasn't, because for the first time, transporting information had become more dangerous than discovering it. Exploration alone was no longer enough. The real challenge was bringing the knowledge safely back home. It was because of the lost convoy that an extraordinary gathering was called at the Pana Corridor Nexus. Today, historians recognize this meeting as the first joint security summit in galactic history. It became known simply as Pano. No one proposed creating a new empire. No one suggested a unified government. No one spoke of placing the galaxy beneath a single flag. The meeting revolved around only one question: who will protect the next convoy? And perhaps that was the moment history quietly changed forever. Because for the very first time, no one answered, "I will." One representative eventually stood. "We do not know their name. We do not know their species. We do not even know which star system they represented. The data crystal recording the meeting was badly damaged, but one sentence survived. The corridors belong to none of us, but protecting them belongs to all of us. When those words ended, no one spoke, not for a very long time. Historians now describe that silence as one of the most valuable silences in galactic history, because sometimes civilizations make their greatest decisions not by voting, but by remaining silent. When the summit finally concluded, the same message was transmitted across known space. Until further notice, all exploration missions beyond the established corridors are suspended. The consequences were immediate. Research fleets were recalled. New exploration ships never left their hangars. Warning beacons appeared at the entrances of every major energy corridor. For the first time, the galaxy yielded to fear. But while every civilization was focused on protecting itself, something extraordinary was happening. Something no one noticed. After the disappearance of the lost convoy, the energy corridors themselves began to change. At first, scientists blamed faulty sensors, then calibration errors. But every new measurement produced the same impossible result. Some corridors were slowing down. Others were splitting into branches that had never existed before. And some simply disappeared, only to reappear, leading toward entirely unknown star systems. It was as if the invisible arteries of the galaxy were shifting beneath their feet. Every scientific report reached the same conclusion. The corridors were not fixed. They were dynamic. They were changing. They were evolving, almost as if they possessed a life of their own. That discovery instantly changed the discussion. Protecting convoys was no longer the greatest challenge. The roads themselves were moving. And if the roads changed, the maps would become obsolete. If the maps became obsolete, then the galaxy would have to be discovered all over again. Today, historians remember this moment by another name: the Second Age of Discovery. Because for the first time, the galaxy revealed that it was not merely a place to be explored. It was something far greater, something still unfolding. While the galaxy struggled to adapt, something extraordinary happened. One of the photon energy corridors shifted without warning. Its course changed, opening a path to a star system that had never appeared on any map. The first exploration report contained only 4 words: "Someone lived here." Notice the wording. Not "someone lives here," but "someone lived here." That single difference changed everything. Because the exploration fleet found no living beings, no transmissions, no active energy production, nothing. And yet, there was no doubt a civilization had existed there, or at least it once had. Today, that forgotten system is known simply as the Silent Crown. The planets remained perfectly aligned. Orbital mechanics were flawless. Artificial satellites still circled their worlds. But life was gone. The cities still stood. The spaceports remained intact. Landing platforms looked as though no ship had touched them for hundreds of cycles. And perhaps the strangest discovery of all, There was not a single sign of war. No melted armor, no wreckage, no energy burns, no defensive emplacements, no battlefield, nothing. It was as if billions of lives had vanished on the very same day, or perhaps had simply walked away. The exploration teams remained there for months. Every week they uncovered another city, another station, another monument, and every discovery raised even more questions. Because everything was complete. Nothing had been abandoned during construction. Nothing had been left unfinished. The cities were fully built. Power stations appeared, ready to operate. Spaceports, ready to receive incoming ships. Even the agricultural fields still waited for a harvest that never came. It felt as though someone had said, "We'll be back soon," and then never returned. Only a handful of personal journals recovered during the expedition have survived to this day. One belonged to an unnamed structural engineer. His final entry contained only a single sentence. "This isn't a disaster. This is abandonment." Today, those words are considered among the most haunting quotations in galactic history. But that discovery raised an even greater question. How does an entire civilization disappear without fighting a war? For centuries, scholars searched for an answer. Some believed their energy reserves had failed. Others proposed a mass migration. Some argued that the civilization simply collapsed from within. Yet none of those theories could explain one extraordinary detail: the clocks. Thousands of timekeeping devices were recovered. Inside government halls, private homes, research stations, even the control towers of abandoned spaceports. Every single one had stopped. Not one cycle apart, not 1 hour apart, not even 1 second apart. They had all stopped at precisely the same moment. At first, investigators suspected a massive power failure. But the evidence refused to cooperate. Some clocks ran on crystal energy. Others were entirely mechanical. Some relied on technologies that remain beyond our understanding even today. And still, every one of them stopped at exactly the same instant. The Central Archive eventually gave the event a single official name: the Great Halt. No one knows why it happened. No one knows how it happened. But every surviving record, every calendar, every clock, every timekeeping device recovered from the Silent Crown points to the exact same moment. Many historians no longer believe that the Silent Crown civilization was destroyed by war. They believe something happened. One single event. An event that stopped time for an entire civilization. That theory remains controversial even today. But one consequence cannot be denied. When the first exploration fleet returned from the Silent Crown, for the first time, historians became more important than engineers. Because every civilization wanted the answer to the same question. What happened to them? And perhaps, more importantly, could it happen to us? As the investigations continued, the scientists began noticing something deeply unsettling. The Silent Crown was empty, but it wasn't dead. The earliest reports revealed that the city's enormous energy towers still activated at regular intervals. No one operated them. No one maintained them. Yet every few cycles, energy flowed through the network once again, only to fade away moments later. Docking bays opened and closed without a single ship requesting permission to land. Ancient transit lines briefly came alive with energy, despite carrying no passengers. Entire districts illuminated as though night had fallen, before slowly disappearing into darkness once more. These strange events would later become known as the autonomous cycles. Even today, no one can explain why they continue. The most advanced power stations, built by modern civilizations, require constant maintenance. Without engineers, without replacement parts, without supervision, they eventually fail. The systems of the Silent Crown never did. That is why many engineers now openly admit that the technology powering the Silent Crown remains beyond our understanding. One observation report, recovered from the first scientific expedition, contains a sentence that has puzzled historians for centuries. The city doesn't recognize us because it is still waiting for its own people. Most historians dismiss the statement as nothing more than a poetic observation. Artificial systems specialists disagree. According to their research, the infrastructure of the Silent Crown never truly shut down. It simply never stopped waiting. That theory has never been proven. Yet every expedition sent there, across hundreds of cycles, reported the same impossible phenomenon. No systems failed, no buildings collapsed, no maintenance crews existed, no one repaired anything. And still, the city continued to function, as if time itself had forgotten to let it die. 155 cycles. Into the investigation. As an exploration vessel prepared to depart, one of its passive sensors detected an incredibly faint signal. At first, the crew dismissed it as cosmic background noise. Then, the signal appeared again, and again, and again, every 33 seconds. Always the same frequency, always the same strength, always exactly the same. For hundreds of cycles, the pattern never changed. 33 seconds. Silence. Then the signal returned. Again. Scientists devoted years trying to understand it. Energy specialists analyzed its frequency. Linguists searched for traces of language. Mathematicians looked for hidden numerical patterns. Signal engineers attempted to reconstruct its origin. No one reached a definitive answer. Then, during the 224th cycle, everything changed. One of the damaged data crystals, recovered decades earlier from Station 47, was examined once again. This time, using a newly developed reconstruction system. For the first time, sections that had remained unreadable began to reveal themselves. The recording contained the voice of an unidentified engineer. The audio was badly damaged. Entire sentences were still missing. Many words remain impossible to recover. But 3 fragments survived. Fragments that would eventually appear in every major history book. Corridors cannot be found. Silence. Corridors are listened to. Another pause. Then, one final sentence, almost completely destroyed by time. They're changing direction. For years, those words remained little more than a mystery, until researchers made one final discovery. The interval of the repeating signal, 33 seconds, matched exactly the final recorded time displayed on every clock recovered from the silent crown. Not approximately, not almost, exactly. Was it coincidence? No one knows. No explanation has ever been universally accepted. But from that moment forward, the silent crown was no longer considered merely an abandoned civilization. For the first time, a different possibility entered the discussion. Perhaps the silent crown had never truly ended. Perhaps someone intended to return. Or perhaps they had never actually left. As the investigation continued, the discoveries became even more extraordinary. Beneath the cities of the Silent Crown, researchers uncovered enormous ring-shaped structures. At first, they were believed to be power plants. Later, gravity stabilizers. Then, planetary defense systems. They were none of those things. The structures generated no measurable energy, contained no weapons, displayed no defensive capabilities, and yet they represented the most sophisticated engineering ever discovered in the known galaxy. Scientists spent decades trying to understand them. Every theory failed. Then, one proposal changed everything. Perhaps the Silent Crown had never tried to build faster ships. Perhaps they had reached a point where ships were no longer necessary. Perhaps they had learned to reshape the corridors themselves. Or perhaps they had simply discovered a richer, untouched region of the galaxy and quietly left for a better future. Impossible? Perhaps. Impossible things have a habit of becoming history. When this theory was first published, the scientific community reacted with disbelief. Because it was more than a new technology, it challenged the very foundations of galactic civilization. Every transportation system ever built assumed one simple truth: the corridors never changed. But what if they could? What if a civilization could close one corridor and create another? If that were true, then the most powerful civilization would not be the one with the largest fleet. It would be the one that controlled the roads between the stars. But the most disturbing discovery had yet to come. Hidden beneath the cities, researchers uncovered structures far older than the cities themselves. Detailed analysis revealed something almost impossible. The structures appeared to be older than the planets they rested upon. When that conclusion was first announced, most scientists rejected it outright. How could a structure be older than the world beneath it? The measurements were repeated, again and again. The results never changed. Today, these mysterious constructs are known simply as the foundation rings. No one knows what they were built for. No one knows who built them. But every foundation ring ever discovered shares one remarkable characteristic. Each one is located at the exact intersection of the Pana energy corridors. That observation gave birth to two terrifying possibilities. Either the corridors existed because of the rings, or the rings had been built millions of cycles earlier, knowing exactly where the corridors would one day appear. Both possibilities were equally unsettling, because both suggested the galaxy was following a design far older than anyone had ever imagined. Against this backdrop, another forgotten record suddenly gained new importance. A record from Station 47. Most of the station's archives remained classified for centuries. Only recently did the Central Archive authorize public access to selected fragments. For the first time, historians could read the personal journals of the engineers who had worked there. The first entries were almost disappointingly ordinary. Engine tests, energy measurements, geological surveys, routine maintenance, nothing remarkable. Until one journal stopped mid-sentence. Only a single line could be recovered from the damaged data crystal. Energy isn't flowing. A brief interruption. It's being directed, independent of us. Today, many historians consider those words among the most important ever recorded. Because until that moment, every civilization believed energy spread naturally across the galaxy. Station 47 suggested something else. The galaxy was not empty, and energy was not random. Every star system was connected by an immense network invisible to the eye. At first, scientists blamed faulty sensors. Then, software errors. Later, unknown cosmic interference. But every new measurement produced exactly the same result. Energy always followed the same pathways. It was almost as if the galaxy itself was breathing. Every star, a heartbeat. Every planet, part of a circulation system too vast for any civilization to comprehend. Even today, no one knows how those networks came to exist. Were they natural, artificial, or the final work of a civilization older than memory itself? The Central Archive still has no answer. Among the ruins of the Silent Crown, researchers discovered the same unidentified symbol carved again and again into ancient stone panels. It represented no emperor, no government, no known language, only the same symbol repeated endlessly. The leader of the first expedition left behind a single sentence in his personal journal. Sometimes, a civilization's greatest gift isn't the answers it leaves behind, it's the questions. Perhaps the greatest legacy of the Silent Crown was never its technology, nor its cities, nor even its corridors. Perhaps its greatest legacy was curiosity, because from that day forward, the civilizations of the galaxy gradually stopped chasing resources alone. For the first time, they began chasing the truth. While the Galactic Commission continued searching for the mysteries of the past, the future was still being built. By now, the Pana Corridor Nexus was no longer just a crossroads. It had become the heartbeat of the galaxy. Every cycle, tens of thousands of merchant fleets, millions of tons of raw materials, countless research vessels, hundreds of maintenance convoys, all passed through the same system. If a single component left a factory on one world and arrived at a shipyard on another, it almost certainly passed through the Pana Corridor Nexus. At first, no one believed that success could become a weakness. More hangars were built, more energy depots, more shipyards. The Nexus expanded, then expanded again, and without realizing it, the galaxy had become dependent on a single system. Economic historians now refer to this phenomenon as the Pana-centralization fallacy. Everyone believed the safest route would always remain the best route. History would prove otherwise, because sometimes the safest path becomes the greatest vulnerability. The Central Archive preserves hundreds of reports from that morning. The very first one seemed completely ordinary. Convoy 14, delayed by 6 minutes. No one reacted. 6 minutes was insignificant on a galactic scale. The operators logged the report and continued working. Then another report arrived. 8 minutes, then 12, then 21. At first, controllers assumed the delay was caused by heavy traffic. But as the minutes passed, more and more vessels began to accumulate. Soon, a sight never before witnessed appeared around the Nexus. Hundreds of ships, engines powered down, waiting quietly for their turn. Hours passed. Nothing moved, because the corridor never opened. For the first time in recorded history, the Pana Energy Corridor failed to activate at its scheduled cycle. That was the moment panic began. Emergency signals flooded the network. Scientific teams were summoned. Energy readings were repeated. Every measurement looked perfectly normal. The corridor was still there. It simply refused to open. Years later, one of the engineers who witnessed the event described it with a single sentence. "The door was still there. It just wouldn't let us in." A small maintenance vessel was chosen for the first test. Its bow reached the entrance of the corridor, then stopped. There was no collision, no explosion, no energy discharge. It was as though an invisible hand held the ship perfectly still. Engine output increased. Nothing changed. Power levels doubled. Still, nothing. The experiment was abandoned. Even today, physicists have never agreed on an explanation. But that day, the galaxy confronted a deeply unsettling possibility. Perhaps the corridors were never just roads. Perhaps they had rules of their own. Rules no civilization had yet discovered. For the first time, the same message echoed across the galaxy. The Pana Corridor Nexus is down. Today, historians recognize that day as the beginning of the first galactic economic crisis. The crisis spread quietly, like an infection. During the first week, only a handful of mining colonies stopped production. By the second week, energy refineries delayed their deliveries. By the third, one of the largest shipyards announced that all new construction would be suspended. Within only 44 cycles, the price of energy crystals had increased 5-fold. Standard reactor cores could no longer be obtained. Replacement components sat inside warehouses, unable to reach their destinations. Yet even then, no one recognized the greatest danger. Because whenever something stopped working in the galaxy, something else always followed. Distrust. And distrust has always been far more destructive than any enemy. Across known space, trade agreements collapsed, one after another. Not because either side had broken its promise, but because no one could answer a single question. Would the convoy arrive in 7 cycles, 70, or would it never arrive at all? No one knew. As the crisis deepened, so did desperation. And throughout history, desperation has always given birth to dangerous decisions. Some fleets abandoned the official corridors altogether. Instead, they began searching for new routes, uncharted passages, unstable energy streams, temporary corridors, routes that existed on no map, paths with risks no one had ever measured. For a brief time, the gamble paid off. Some companies completed deliveries weeks ahead of their competitors. Others discovered entirely new systems unknown to the rest of the galaxy. For a while, these risk-takers were celebrated. Some were even called heroes. But history teaches us that success without understanding always carries a hidden cost. After the disappearance of the lost Pana convoy, the galaxy suffered its second great wave of unexplained losses. This time, it wasn't one fleet, it was 13. 13 independent convoys vanished inside unmapped corridors. Some eventually returned, but none of them returned unchanged. The crews were alive, the ships were intact, the cargo remained untouched, yet something was terribly wrong. Every navigation log was empty, as though the journey had never happened. Engineers found no explanation. Pilots remembered nothing. Their clocks displayed the correct time. Fuel consumption proved the ships had traveled for weeks, but not a single crew member could remember where those weeks had gone. The Central Archive responded with its strongest decision since the first contact crisis. From that day forward, every newly discovered corridor would require independent verification before it could be opened to public navigation. No captain would ever again chart a new route alone. The decision was fiercely criticized, because free exploration had always been one of the oldest traditions of the galaxy. But history occasionally forces civilizations to choose between freedom and security. That day, the galaxy chose security. Today, historians remember that decision as the birth of the modern galactic protocols. Perhaps a civilization writes its first true laws, not because crimes have been committed, but because chaos can no longer be allowed. Then, just as the new protocols were taking shape, something happened. Something no one could explain. An unidentified data packet arrived at the central observation station of the Pana Corridor Nexus. There was no sender, no timestamp, no originating system, no transmission record. Only a single sentence. You have learned to use the corridors. Now, learn to listen to them. The station personnel dismissed it as nothing more than an elaborate prank. The file was archived, forgotten. No one could have imagined that those 12 words would one day be recognized as one of the most important warnings in galactic history. When the subject is an entire galaxy. History is rarely written on battlefields. It is written inside shipyards, deep beneath mining colonies, within quiet research stations, in forgotten laboratories, and upon the workbenches of engineers whose names history never remembers. Because in a galaxy this vast, no civilization can hope to survive through war alone. Without science, without industry, without technology, victory becomes meaningless. In truth, even surviving becomes impossible. A battlecruiser is never built in a single day. Its story begins hundreds of cycles earlier, with a small calculation made by an anonymous engineer. A convoy does not reach its destination because of one captain. It arrives because of hundreds of invisible hands. Cartographers, energy specialists, maintenance crews, crystal refiners, engine designers, logistics coordinators, and thousands of workers whose names will never appear in any history book. Most of those people have long since been forgotten, but the systems they built still carry the weight of civilization. As the Pana Corridor Nexus continued to grow, the galaxy encountered a different kind of crisis. Every star system followed its own rules. Every merchant fleet used different standards. Every maintenance station measured energy differently. Even identical engine components were known by different names on different worlds. An engineer attempting to read a technical report from another civilization first had to learn an entirely different vocabulary. And by the time they mastered one, another appeared. At first, these differences seemed harmless. Small misunderstandings, minor delays, nothing more. But as the galaxy expanded, confusion became expense. Expense became delay. Delay became crisis. And eventually, the crisis touched everyone. Among the surviving records of the Central Archive, one sentence perfectly captures the era. Ships were moving faster than decisions. Technology advanced. Engines became stronger. New corridors were discovered. But administration could not keep pace. Then, during one routine meeting at the Pana Corridor Nexus, a young engineer made a proposal. It was not a revolutionary engine, not a powerful weapon, not the discovery of another corridor. It was something far simpler, a common standard. Every energy core measured the same way. Every maintenance report written in the same format. Every corridor marker using the same symbols. The room barely reacted. No applause, no celebration. The next speaker was already preparing to continue. The record keeper simply wrote a few notes and moved on. History has taught us something remarkable. The ideas that reshape civilizations are rarely the loudest ones. More often, they are the quiet ideas that simply work. That day, no one recognized the importance of what had just been proposed. Most of those present merely nodded, made a few notes, and continued with the meeting. Centuries later, when historians revisited the records, one sentence caught everyone's attention. Without standards, there can be no order. Today, those words are widely regarded as the first unofficial principle of the Galactic Industrial Bureau, because the Bureau was never born as an army. It was never born as a government. It was born as a standard. Standards have little value without verification. And verification requires authority. It requires responsibility. In the beginning, every star system sent its own inspectors. Corridors were surveyed. Energy stations were examined. Maintenance reports were compared. At first, the system appeared to work, until something unexpected happened. The very same station could be inspected by 3 different teams and receive 3 completely different conclusions. One report declared it safe. Another demanded immediate maintenance. A third recommended its permanent closure. No one was acting in bad faith. Each civilization simply judged risk by different standards. Today, historians remember this period as the consistency crisis. The problem was never dishonesty. The problem was that everyone believed they were right. A historic summit was soon convened at the Pana Corridor Nexus. The delegates who attended were not generals. They were engineers, statisticians, energy inspectors, cartographers, logistics specialists, people whose names history has almost forgotten. After hours of debate, an elderly energy inspector placed a thick data crystal on the conference table. Inside were tens of thousands of technical reports collected from across the galaxy. For a long moment, he said nothing. The room fell silent. Then he spoke. "Our problem isn't the corridors." A pause. "Our problem is that every civilization believes in a different version of the truth." Another pause. "If we cannot solve that, we will not survive." Those words changed the direction of the entire meeting. For the first time, no one asked for a faster engine. No one demanded a stronger fleet. No one proposed a more powerful weapon. Instead, every delegate realized they all needed the very same thing: reliable, shared, verified knowledge. That day, for the very first time, someone proposed a common archive. Every exploration report would be stored in one place. Every energy survey would be verified using the same methodology. No newly discovered corridor would appear on an official star chart without independent confirmation. Today, the proposal seems obvious. At the time, it was fiercely opposed. Some civilizations refused to share their discoveries. Others feared their commercial secrets would be stolen. Some warned that a centralized archive would eventually become a tool of power. History would later reveal that both sides were right, because shared knowledge builds civilizations, but controlled knowledge builds power. Despite the opposition, the proposal passed by a narrow majority. It became known as the First Common Archive Protocol. Hundreds signed the document. Perhaps that detail mattered less than people believed, because some ideas do not belong to the individuals who write them. They appear only when history is finally ready. That day, the galaxy decided to gather its memory in one place. As the cycles passed, something remarkable happened. Ships stopped disappearing as often. Maintenance times became shorter. Energy losses gradually declined. The same mistakes were no longer repeated. Quietly, patiently, without celebration, the Common Archive was doing exactly what it had been created to do: remember. Yet beneath this quiet success, another reality continued to grow. The corridors never stopped changing. Then one day, Corridor 18RAX changed direction without warning. Moments later, it opened into a star system that had never appeared on any recorded map. Within hours, similar reports began arriving from observation stations across the galaxy. One report, then 5, then 20. Every one of them described the same impossible discovery. There were places that no map had ever shown, not because they had suddenly appeared, they had always been there. The corridors had simply chosen to reveal them. Scientists would later name this event the Great Cosmic Expansion. Once again, the galaxy reminded every civilization how little they truly understood its scale. The first survey reports left everyone confused. Entire star systems had appeared where none had existed before. Some contained only a single lonely planet. Others, massive gas giants surrounded by dozens of moons. Several appeared habitable even during the very first scan. For the first time, the Central Archive issued the exact same order to every observation station. No fleet is to enter any newly discovered system without authorization. The reason was not danger, it was uncertainty. Because the galaxy was no longer expanding, it was rearranging itself. During one of the earliest scientific councils, an elderly mathematician quietly stood, without saying a word. He placed a star chart upon the table. Every corridor that had shifted during the previous 200 cycles was marked. At first glance, the pattern looked completely random. Then, the mathematician slowly rotated the map, exactly 42 degrees. The room fell silent. The scattered lines no longer looked random. Together, they formed an enormous geometric pattern. No one could explain it. The corridors had never been moving at random. They were following a mathematical order. No civilization had yet learned to read. The only question was whether humanity and every other civilization had been looking too late or simply looking the wrong way. Only one sentence appeared in the official minutes of that meeting. The galaxy does not throw dice. It is far more orderly than we ever imagined. Those words changed science forever. From that day forward, the objective was no longer to predict the corridors. It was to understand the rules that governed them. Across the galaxy, academies began working together for the very first time. Mathematicians, physicists, energy specialists, navigation engineers, even philosophers, because everyone had reached the same conclusion. Some questions cannot be answered by science alone. To this day, one sentence carved into the entrance hall of the Galactic Academy continues to greet every new student. Knowing how to use a road is knowledge. Asking why the road exists is wisdom. As scientists slowly began to understand the corridors, engineers were confronting a far more practical reality. The challenge was no longer discovering new routes. The challenge was building ships capable of surviving them. The first exploration vessels had been designed for narrow, predictable corridors. The new generation behaved differently. Some overloaded a ship's energy core. Others disrupted engine harmonics. Some placed such extreme stress on the hull that molecular fractures began appearing inside the structure itself. Across the galaxy, every civilization faced the same problem. Ships were evolving more slowly than the corridors. Among the oldest records of the Central Archive, one sentence perfectly captures the era. The roads are no longer waiting for our ships. Those words marked the beginning of a new technological age, because no single shipyard could solve the problem alone. One system specialized in propulsion. Another refined energy crystals. A third developed corridor sensors. A fourth discovered entirely new elements and advanced alloys. For the first time, the galaxy stopped building ships as individual civilizations. It began building them together. Historians now consider this moment the true birth of modern galactic industry. A starship was no longer constructed on a single world. Its hull came from one system, its engines from another, its energy core from a distant colony. Its navigation systems arrived months later through the Pana Corridor nexus. Building one vessel had become a journey, almost as long as the voyage it would eventually undertake. At first, the results were remarkable. Production accelerated. Ships became larger. Maintenance costs declined. corridor compatibility improved dramatically. Everything appeared to be working, until a weakness no one had anticipated revealed itself. Because now, the delay of a single component could halt an entire civilization. Without one energy crystal, shipyards fell silent. Without a single sensor array, months of work came to a standstill. Modern historians know this period by another name, the Age of Interdependence, because from that moment forward, no civilization was truly independent. That dependence became the galaxy's greatest strength, and at the very same time, its greatest vulnerability. Out of that dependency, a new profession emerged. At first, they were known simply as logistics coordinators. The title sounded ordinary. Their responsibility was anything but. They were not moving cargo. They were synchronizing an entire civilization. For the first time, someone began calculating exactly which component needed to arrive at exactly which shipyard, through exactly which corridor, at exactly which cycle. The heartbeat of galactic industry was no longer determined by engines. It was determined by schedules. When historians examine the earliest surviving logistics tables, one detail always surprises them. There are no ship names, no admirals, no famous captains, only corridor designations, component codes, energy classifications, timetables. Perhaps that tells us everything we need to know. Many historians now argue that the true architects of galactic civilization were never soldiers. They were planners. Because building one warship requires engineering. Building 1,000 warships across 1,000 different systems at exactly the same time requires civilization. And for the first time, the galaxy was beginning to behave like one. Just when it seemed everything had finally found its rhythm, another problem emerged. The Pana Corridor Nexus was no longer becoming congested with ships. It was becoming congested with decisions. A maintenance request could take weeks. Approval for an exploration mission might take months. An engineer wishing to construct a single energy station often needed permission from dozens of independent councils. One captain left behind perhaps the most memorable journal entry of that entire era. Before entering a newly discovered corridor, he had been forced to obtain authorization from 17 separate scientific authorities. His log contained only one sentence: "Will the corridor change before the paperwork is approved?" Today, the story usually earns a quiet smile. Back then, it was no joke. The galaxy was no longer too vast to explore. It had become too vast to coordinate. And yet, coordination had become essential. Out of necessity, a completely new profession emerged. People whose only responsibility was coordination. They made sure every component, every report, every convoy reached the right place at the right time. Today, the role seems ordinary. Many historians disagree. They believe these quiet coordinators were among the greatest architects of galactic civilization. Because an extraordinary discovery could be delayed for years by a single missing data crystal. A navigation model sent to the wrong system could leave hundreds of fleets waiting. It was for this reason that a new department was quietly established beneath the Common Archive. Its official title was extraordinarily long, but the people who worked there called it something else: the Positive Flow Office, because their responsibility was simple: keep information flowing. Many of the coordination methods still used today can be traced back to the first schedules drawn inside that modest office. Some historians go even further. They call it the most influential room in galactic history. There were no weapons there, no admirals, no politicians, only maps, data crystals, and people working quietly. Because civilizations rarely survive thanks to those who speak the loudest. They survive because of those who work without being noticed. Just as order finally seemed possible, the Central Archive's primary computational system issued a warning. It wasn't read, it wasn't classified as an emergency. It contained only one sentence: corridor density has exceeded its natural threshold. No one understood what it meant, because no one had ever imagined that corridors might possess a capacity. As corridor traffic increased, the questions began to change. The issue was no longer whether a corridor would open. The question became, who should pass first? Who should wait? Whose cargo mattered most? One exploration fleet needed access to a newly discovered system. At the same time, a medical convoy was carrying life-saving supplies to plague-stricken colonies. Elsewhere, a massive shipyard was waiting for a critical energy core. Every fleet needed the same corridor. Every mission claimed to be urgent. The first conflicts did not begin with violence. They began with priority. No one argued. No one fired a weapon. Everyone simply believed their mission should come first. The Central Archive still preserves thousands of formal appeals from that era. Our cargo is essential. Scientific research cannot wait. Entire colonies face starvation. Our reactors are reaching critical levels. Every claim was reasonable, and perhaps that was the real problem. For the first time, everyone was right. But the corridor could only accept one fleet at a time. So, another historic decision was made. Captains would no longer decide who crossed first. Independent observers would. It sounded perfectly fair until the first decisions were made. Within only a few cycles, both sides accused the observers of favoritism. No matter whom they chose, someone lost. And those who enforced the rules quickly became the least popular people in the galaxy. That was the moment civilization discovered a difficult truth. Neutrality is not standing with no one. Neutrality is standing with the rules. That idea spread quietly from the Pana Corridor Nexus to the great shipyards. From the shipyards to the common archive. Eventually, people stopped asking, who made this decision? Instead, they began asking, which rule made this decision? Legal historians now regard this change as the true beginning of modern galactic governance. Because powerful leaders eventually disappear, well-written rules can survive for generations. Among the oldest files of the Central Archive, one anonymous note has survived. People were searching for fair rulers. We began writing fair rules. Today, many historians consider that single sentence the true beginning of the modern galactic administrative age. Without realizing it, the galaxy had begun its greatest transformation. It was slowly evolving from heroes into institutions. At the very heart of the Pana Corridor Nexus once stood a modest maintenance station. Today, that same location is home to the modern Galactic Archive Complex, a structure rising more than 1,500 meters. Its towering domes, its endless archives, its millions of records, its countless visitors. Today, it is regarded as one of the most important buildings in the galaxy. But in those days, it was nothing extraordinary, just another station, a place where exhausted engineers, convoy captains, researchers, and maintenance crews stopped to rest. On any ordinary evening, someone walking through its central corridor could see representatives from a dozen different star systems sharing the same long table. Some were sleeping, some argued over technical reports. Others simply stared into the distance, trying to clear their minds. According to the Central Archive, the first great meeting was held inside that very station. There were only 32 representatives, seated around an old circular metal table. None of them represented the entire galaxy. Instead, each represented one of its greatest problems. One spoke for the energy producers, another for the shipyards, another for the exploration fleets, another for the colonies. One representative spoke only for the maintenance engineers. Despite their differences, they all shared one thing. They were tired. They had gathered, again, to solve problems they believed had already been solved. The meeting began. Hours passed. Arguments continued. No decisions were made. Everyone spoke. No one listened. The energy guilds demanded new reactors. The shipyards needed more raw materials. The colonies wanted safer transportation. Scientists requested larger research budgets. Every request made perfect sense. Every request was reasonable and satisfying. All of them at the same time was impossible. Most of the original recordings have long since been lost. Only a small fragment from the final hours survived. After another endless debate, an elderly engineer slowly stood. Her name has been lost to history. Her question has not. She looked across the maps spread over the table. For a long moment, she remained silent. The room was still noisy. Arguments continued. Even in the back, two delegates were still whispering to each other. Then she spoke, and somehow everyone heard her. Why are we solving the same problem 32 different times? Silence. Real silence. Even the two delegates at the back stopped speaking. Because she was right. 32 systems, 32 standards, 32 maintenance procedures, 32 educational methods, 32 separate solutions to the very same problems. No one had ever said it so plainly. After another long pause, she spoke again. Perhaps we don't need better engines. She stopped, looked around the room, then quietly finished. Perhaps we simply need to stop solving the same problems over and over again. The official minutes contain only one word to describe what happened next. Silence. For 3 full minutes. No one objected. No one applauded. because for the first time, everyone saw the same truth. The galaxy did not suffer from a lack of resources. It suffered from a lack of coordination. That day, someone proposed the creation of the Grand Industrial Council. Not as a government, not as an empire, certainly not as a military force, but as a neutral institution. One purpose: to allow every civilization to learn from every other. When the meeting ended, the delegates simply went home. No speeches, no celebrations, no declarations that history had just changed. Most boarded the first available convoys back to their own systems. But one thing remained: the proposal. It entered the archives, and within those documents lay the first seeds of what would eventually become the greatest institution the galaxy had ever known. Today, historians recognize that proposal as the first true blueprint of modern galactic administration. Because civilizations do not become great simply by becoming stronger. They become great when they learn how to work together. The process of formally establishing the Grand Industrial Council did not happen overnight. It took years. Debates continued. Objections were raised. Some galactic councils refused to participate. Others insisted on their own conditions. Some chose to wait and watch. More than once, the negotiations collapsed. More than once, people believed the entire idea would simply disappear. A civilization this vast could never coordinate itself. It sounded like a dream, nothing more. Yet every deadlock produced something valuable: a stronger draft, a clearer protocol, a better compromise. Every failure forced the agreement to become more complete, more balanced, more resilient. No civilization received everything it wanted. Every civilization gave something up. Perhaps that was exactly why the agreement survived. The records preserved inside the Central Archive reveal something remarkable. With every new meeting, the documents became longer, more detailed, more careful. The minutes from the first gathering filled only a few pages. The final negotiation document became the longest cooperative agreement ever written in galactic history. Because, for the first time, multiple civilizations were not trying to erase their differences. They were trying to understand them and build something stronger because of them. During those years, the galaxy learned many lessons. It learned that lasting decisions matter more than fast ones. It learned that agreements, signed by everyone, outlive victories won by only one side. And perhaps, most importantly, it discovered that despite every difference, every civilization shared the very same future. Because the galaxy was still growing. And within a growing galaxy, no civilization could remain completely alone. Today, historians summarize that entire era with only 3 words: the galaxy learned. It learned how to explore. It learned how to share. It learned how to disagree without falling apart. And, perhaps, hardest of all, it learned how to admit its own mistakes. Because civilizations do not become greater the moment they make a mistake. They become greater the moment they learn from it. And the galaxy had made many mistakes. It had paid a very high price. But it had also learned more than anyone could have imagined. The corridors would continue to change. New systems would appear. New crises would emerge. New dangers would rise. Some from beyond, some from within. But the galaxy was no longer facing them alone. And perhaps that was the greatest transformation history had witnessed. Not the birth of a government, not the rise of an empire, but the birth of institutions, of trust, of cooperation, of a civilization finally learning to stand as one. Since its creation, the Common Archive had grown quietly. In its earliest years, it resembled little more than a modest data center, collecting reports from only a handful of observation stations. Then it expanded 10 systems, 100, 1,000. Eventually, thousands of star systems began connecting their databases to a single archive. But growth always brings new challenges. The archive's first true test did not arrive during a war, nor in the middle of a great crisis. It appeared during something far more ordinary, a routine inspection. While comparing annual maintenance records, one technician noticed a subtle inconsistency. Certain data from different years no longer matched. At first, he assumed it was nothing more than a synchronization error, a software update, a damaged record. But the deeper he looked, the more disturbing the truth became. Some records had been altered. Not major events, not famous battles, not legendary discoveries. Only the energy ratings of a few corridors, the dates inside routine maintenance reports, tiny details, details almost no one would ever notice. And that was exactly what made them so dangerous. A large falsification is discovered quickly. Small, systematic alterations can remain hidden for decades. And while they remain hidden, they slowly reshape the truth itself. That discovery led directly to the creation of the archive's first Integrity Commission. Its mission was not simply to protect the records. Its mission was to verify that the records themselves were true. Today, the decision may seem obvious. Historians disagree. They often say that a civilization cannot build its future without protecting its past, because a society whose history can be rewritten will eventually lose its future as well. The Commission never discovered who was responsible. Some evidence suggested outside interference. Other clues pointed to someone within the archive itself. Perhaps both were true. No one can say for certain. Today, visitors entering the Grand Archive pass beneath a simple inscription carved above the main security gate. This archive belongs to no one, and therefore it belongs to everyone. No one knows who wrote those words. No one knows when they first appeared. Yet nearly every historian who stands beneath them leaves thinking the same thing. Discovering the truth requires curiosity. Protecting the truth requires courage. Today, most books on galactic history focus on great civilizations, great fleets, and charismatic leaders who shaped history with extraordinary decisions. That is understandable. Great things capture our attention. Great names are the ones history remembers. But anyone who truly wishes to understand this era must look elsewhere, into the shadows cast by the great powers, because another story was unfolding there: the rise of the smaller civilizations. The Great Expansion did not open new routes only for the mighty. It also revealed entirely new opportunities for isolated colonies, independent settlements, small trading communities, and forgotten research stations. Because when a new corridor appeared, it was rarely the largest fleets that reached it first. More often, it was a single ship, small, fast, independent, commanded by people who feared missing an opportunity far more than they feared the unknown. History remembers them by many names: pioneers, explorers, free traders, sometimes simply opportunists. Their legal status changed from one region to another, but they all shared one defining characteristic: they preferred drawing maps to reading them. Among the oldest records of the Pana Corridor Nexus, one story has survived. A small merchant vessel discovered a corridor that had not yet been entered into the official archive. Following the law, its captain submitted the coordinates to the Central Archive. Several cycles later, the discovery was officially confirmed. Soon afterward, one of the galaxy's largest commercial consortiums filed a formal request. It wished to obtain exclusive commercial rights to that corridor. Its argument seemed straightforward. Large corporations accepted risks far beyond those faced by independent captains. Therefore, they claimed the right to receive commercial priority over newly discovered routes. The Central Archive rejected the request immediately. The debate did not end there. It continued for years, eventually becoming one of the first recorded disputes over intellectual ownership in galactic history. Only a single sentence from the final judgment has survived. A road is not owned because it is discovered. A road earns its meaning only when it is used. Even today, that sentence is studied inside every major galactic academy of law, because throughout history, the same question would return again and again. The contributions made by these smaller civilizations were never merely economic, nor purely scientific. They were political. Every new colony, every independent station, every trading outpost made the map of galactic governance more complex. The great powers may have possessed greater strength, but the smaller civilizations possessed greater numbers. And throughout history, numbers have often shaped the destiny of civilizations, just as much as power itself. History has always loved its commanders, its leaders, its explorers, the people said to have changed the course of civilization. But history rarely remembers maintenance engineers, and perhaps that is one of its greatest injustices, because throughout the entire history of the galaxy, no great decision was ever made real by speeches alone. Every historic achievement, every celebrated victory, every famous discovery was built by hundreds, sometimes thousands, of people whose names were never recorded. During the golden age of the Pana Corridor Nexus, a small room existed deep beneath the station itself. Officially, it was called Infrastructure Maintenance and Repair Center. The people who worked there called it something else: the heart of the galaxy. At first, the name sounds almost absurd. How could one small maintenance room become the heart of an entire galaxy? The numbers provided the answer. Every major technical failure within the corridor nexus was solved inside that room. During nearly every historic summit, the station's energy grid came dangerously close to failure. And each time, the engineers below solved the problem before anyone upstairs even realized it had existed. The archives preserve only one personal journal from that room. Its author remains unknown. Only a few pages have survived, but the final entry has never been forgotten. Today, I repaired the power distribution system. Tomorrow, history books will celebrate a commander's great decision. That decision could never have been made without the cable I repaired today. I'm writing this because no one else ever will. Today, those words are quoted across the galaxy, and every time they leave behind the same question: can any civilization ever truly remember everyone who built it? The answer is rarely comforting. No, it cannot. Memory is selective. It remembers the powerful, the brilliant, the victorious, the loudest voices. But civilizations are rarely built by those who receive the applause. They are built by those who quietly make sure everything else continues to work. Without those forgotten people, the galaxy could never have become what it is today. Perhaps the greatest measure of a life is not how many remember your name. Perhaps it is what remains long after your name has been forgotten. While the Grand Industrial Council was still taking shape, another revolution was quietly unfolding inside the scientific community. By then, everyone knew the energy corridors were not fixed. But researchers were beginning to realize something even more remarkable. The corridors had a rhythm. At first, it appeared to be nothing more than a mathematical curiosity. Certain corridors became more active during specific periods. Others weakened, then recovered. The fluctuations were initially dismissed as coincidence. Later, scientists attempted to link them to cosmic cycles. None of the existing models could fully explain what they were seeing. Everything changed when a young mathematician stopped studying the intervals between the cycles and instead began studying the relationships between the corridors themselves. Today, that discovery is known simply as corridor resonance. It is widely regarded as one of the greatest scientific breakthroughs in galactic history, because the mathematician had uncovered something no one expected. The corridors were not merely fluctuating, they were influencing one another. A disturbance in one corridor could affect another hundreds of light years away. And most astonishing of all, the interactions were not chaotic. They followed a mathematical order, one that could be predicted. When the first resonance map was published, the scientific community immediately split into two camps. The first argued that the pattern was nothing more than coincidence. Intelligent minds naturally search for patterns. Given enough data, meaning can be found almost anywhere. To them, corridor resonance was nothing more than an illusion. The second group reached a very different conclusion. If the behavior of the corridors could be predicted, then perhaps they could also be understood. And anything that can truly be understood can eventually be worked with. The debate continued for decades, but every new observation strengthened the resonance map. Every new monitoring station, every new measurement, every new expedition made the pattern clearer. Then, one day, for the first time, energy stations across the galaxy began operating in perfect coordination. Large convoys departed during periods of maximum corridor stability. Maintenance fleets worked when the corridors reached their weakest phases. For the first time, the galaxy stopped fighting against the corridors. It began working with them. The Central Archive recorded that moment with a single sentence. The galaxy was never our enemy. We simply had not yet learned how to understand its language. The Grand Industrial Council had not yet been officially established. But by then, the entire galaxy was already talking about it. It was during this uncertain period that something entirely unexpected arrived at the Pana Corridor Nexus. An unfamiliar fleet. It was not a commercial convoy, nor an exploration fleet. There were no visible weapons. Its energy signature was remarkably low. Its speed deliberate. Even its approach was unusual. Instead of using the established corridors, the fleet emerged from a forgotten route near the very edge of the known maps. The first attempt at communication came as a surprise. Their language was unlike anything previously recorded. Yet, when compared against the Common Archive's linguistic database, nearly 40% could be understood. Not enough for conversation, but enough to begin. The Pana Corridor Nexus had witnessed many firsts, but this was something different. For the first time, two civilizations sat down, not to negotiate territory, not to discuss war, but to build a common language. The first meetings moved painfully slowly. Every sentence had to be explained word by word. Every reply required the same patience. Days of discussion often produced only a handful of understandable phrases. But those phrases were enough. We are waiting. Is this corridor safe? Yes, it is safe. Another pause. Then the visiting delegation asked one final question. We have resources. We do not need yours, but we need your roads. Today, many historians consider those words one of the most important diplomatic statements in galactic history. Because, for the first time, two civilizations spoke with complete honesty. There were no threats, no demonstrations of military strength, no hidden demands, only a clear request and a response built upon mutual respect. The Central Archive recorded the meeting with unusual simplicity. Neither side lost, neither side won. Both sides left with more than they had brought. Historians often argue that this moment marked the true beginning of modern galactic diplomacy. Not intimidation, not domination, not negotiation through fear, but something far more difficult. Listening before speaking, understanding before deciding, and discovering that cooperation can sometimes achieve what power never could. The first diplomatic contacts brought with them an unexpected challenge: language. At that time, hundreds of different languages were spoken across the galaxy. Some shared distant linguistic roots. Others had evolved in complete isolation. And some were built upon concepts so fundamentally different that direct translation was almost impossible. Consider the idea of trust. In one civilization, trust described the relationship between individuals. In another, trust existed only between institutions. Individuals could never truly be trusted. People changed. Institutions endured. Then there were civilizations where the concept of trust didn't exist at all. Instead, they spoke of probability. Someone will behave as correctly as we expect them to. At first glance, the difference seems almost insignificant. It wasn't, because whenever the word trust appeared across a negotiation table, every delegation understood something completely different. The Common Archive eventually proposed an unusual solution. Rather than forcing one civilization's language upon another, and rather than inventing an entirely new spoken language, they designed a universal symbolic system. Not words, symbols. Not grammar, concepts. Its official designation was the Galactic Intercommunication Protocol. Most people simply called it GIP. Today, every galactic warning sign, every navigation marker, every industrial safety symbol, every standardized docking indicator can trace its origins back to GIP. Even now, the system continues to evolve, because as the galaxy expands, new discoveries create new ideas, and every new idea eventually requires a new symbol. One archivist summarized the achievement with remarkable simplicity. The galaxy never learned to speak one language. It learned to understand one set of symbols. And in the end, that was enough. As preparations for the Grand Industrial Council continued, another profession quietly emerged within the Pana Corridor nexus. No one had a name for them. Until then, no civilization had ever needed such a role. Eventually, they chose their own title: Risk Analysts. At first glance, their responsibility appeared simple: predict the consequences of important decisions. If a corridor opens, what happens? If a trade agreement is signed, who benefits? Who loses? If an energy station is shut down, which colonies will feel the impact? Simple questions, impossible answers. Because within a galaxy, every decision touched thousands of others. Opening one corridor increased traffic through another. That increase placed pressure on neighboring systems. Those systems supplied distant colonies. Those colonies supported shipyards. And before long, a single decision could ripple across half the galaxy. The risk analysts made those invisible chains visible. Their first models were far from perfect. Predictions failed. Calculations proved inaccurate. Some forecasts missed reality entirely. But every mistake became another lesson. Every failed prediction made the next model a little better, a little more reliable. Over time, the risk analysts became one of the most influential and least recognized groups in the galaxy. No major policy was considered without first reading their assessment. No great treaty was signed without waiting for their report. Yet perhaps the most remarkable thing about them was what they never said. They never declared, "Do this." They never warned, "Do not do this." Instead, they simply wrote, "If you choose this path, these consequences may follow. If you choose another, these consequences may follow instead." Nothing more, nothing less. Even today, every modern galactic decision support system still follows that same philosophy. Because the moment an analyst makes the decision, the analyst becomes responsible for it. But an analyst who simply reveals the consequences leaves the responsibility exactly where it belongs, with those who choose. The distinction may seem subtle. History proved otherwise. For centuries, it shaped the way the galaxy governed itself. One sentence from the conclusion of the very first risk analysis report has survived to this day. "We do not possess the authority to declare this decision right or wrong, but you do not possess the luxury of ignoring its consequences." During the Great Expansion, something else quietly changed. For the first time, science no longer had to be practical. Until then, every research project had pursued a specific goal: find a new corridor, discover a new energy source, build a better engine. Science existed to solve problems, to serve practical needs. But as researchers began unraveling the mathematical patterns hidden within the corridors, a few scientists started asking a very different question: why? To many practical minds, the question seemed pointless. Why should anyone care? Why a corridor followed a particular mathematical pattern? Wasn't it enough to know when it would open? Wasn't that all that really mattered? Some thought otherwise. They understood that before asking why, they first had to accept one simple truth: the galaxy was a system, and every system obeyed rules hidden beneath its surface. To understand those rules was to understand the galaxy itself. Those who failed to understand them could only observe. They could use the corridors, but they could never truly comprehend them. History now remembers this generation as the corridor scientists. Perhaps the most influential scientific community the galaxy would ever produce. They discovered no new corridors. They opened no trade routes. They designed no weapons. Yet the theories they wrote across hundreds of cycles would become the foundation upon which future generations built everything else. The Central Archive preserves only a single note attributed to one of them. The author's name has long been lost, but the words have survived across the galaxy. Using a corridor is engineering. Understanding why it exists is science. Doing both is civilization. Today, when we look back at galactic history, we usually remember the great events, the great decisions, the great names. But behind every great moment, there were countless voices whose names never appeared in any archive. Some were voices of frustration. The small colonies whose homes suddenly stood along newly opened corridors during the Great Expansion. The engineers who lost their work when the age of dependency reshaped entire industries. The independent merchants who slowly disappeared as the Pana corridor nexus grew larger and larger. Others were voices of hope. The explorers who, for the first time, had somewhere new to journey. The researchers who realized that the knowledge they gathered could finally be shared across distant star systems through the common archive. The colonists who witnessed the first diplomatic contact and quietly wondered, perhaps our neighbors are not our enemies. Archives record decisions. They preserve treaties, orders, coordinates, reports. But they rarely preserve emotion. They do not record ordinary life or what history actually felt like to ordinary people. And yet, sometimes, small details slip through. The food inventories of maintenance stations reveal periods when supplies began to fail. Navigation logs, covered with handwritten notes, tell stories of exhausting journeys across endless space. Even simple accounting errors can quietly reveal just how exhausted the people behind them must have been. History is written by people. Yet somehow it is so often told without them. That is not the purpose of this record. Its purpose is not merely to recount events. It is also to remember the voices hidden behind them. Because the true greatness of a civilization is not measured during its strongest moments. It is measured by how carefully it listens to its quietest voices. And so, the first great age was drawing to its close. The Grand Industrial Council had not yet been fully established. The true nature of the corridors remained unsolved. The mystery of the Silent Crown still waited for an answer. Most of Station 47's records were still locked away. And yet, the galaxy had become more connected than ever before. It had learned to work together, to make mistakes together, to learn together. It had discovered that even enemies could one day sit across the same diplomatic table. It had learned that even in the middle of distrust, shared standards could still be built. And perhaps, most importantly, it had accepted that no civilization, no matter how powerful, could accomplish everything alone. That realization seems small. History suggests otherwise. Because the greatest changes rarely begin with great victories. They begin with small truths people are finally willing to accept. The galaxy had begun in isolation, in silence, protected by the comforting illusion of self-sufficiency. Then it found its neighbors. It became afraid. It armed itself. It disagreed. It endured crisis after crisis. And with each one, it emerged a little stronger, a little wiser, a little more humble. The Central Archive ends this record with a passage that remains one of its most quoted. No one knows who wrote it. No one knows exactly when it was added. But no one questions its meaning. The galaxy was never perfect. Perhaps it never will be. But with every passing day, it became a little less alone. And perhaps that is the greatest achievement any civilization can hope for. To be less alone, to stand more together, and one day, perhaps, to truly understand. This is not the end. It is only the end of the beginning. The real story is only just beginning. Long before, the Grand Industrial Council held its first official meeting. One of the observation towers at the corridor nexus detected an unusual anomaly. Energy readings were steadily increasing in a single direction. By itself, that was nothing extraordinary. Energy fluctuations were common throughout the galaxy. But this time, something was different. The energy was coming from a corridor, not one already known, not one marked on any chart. It originated from a region that had no name, a place whose existence had not even been confirmed, the edge of the map. Today, the idea of a galactic map feels perfectly natural. Every map has a center, it has borders, and beyond those borders lie the unknown. But in those early days, that idea had not yet taken shape. What exactly was the edge of a galaxy? Wasn't the galaxy supposed to be endless? And if there truly was an edge, what could possibly exist beyond it? At first, these sounded like philosophical questions. They were not. They carried profound practical consequences. Because if a galaxy had an inside and an edge, then the map itself had limits. And once people discovered that limits existed, curiosity would inevitably push beyond them. When the first reports reached the Central Archive, opinions split immediately. Some demanded that an expedition be launched without delay. Others insisted that more observations must be gathered first. Still others argued that the region could represent an unknown danger and that no vessel should approach it at all. After weeks of debate, a decision was finally reached, one that historians still study today. The Corridor Nexus Council issued a remarkably simple directive. Before any expedition, an early warning network will be established to observe the region from a safe distance. Only if no hostile activity is detected will an exploration fleet be permitted to enter, and only for observation. At first glance, it seemed like nothing more than another administrative procedure. It wasn't. For the first time, a voyage into the unknown would not be driven by curiosity alone. It would be guided by protocol. And perhaps that is the true meaning of civilization. Not abandoning curiosity, but learning how to govern it. Galactic history usually revolves around great centers. The Pana Corridor Nexus, the Common Archive, the Grand Industrial Council. But the galaxy was never made only of its centers. Far beyond them, in regions where transmissions took days or even cycles to arrive, millions still lived among the smallest yet most revealing. Records preserved within the Central Archive are the journals kept by distant colonies. Most were never intended to become historical documents. Some were personal notes written by colonial governors. Others were fragments hidden between technical reports filed by energy engineers. Some were completely anonymous, their authors lost to history. Yet every one shared a common theme: distance. The great events of the galaxy always reached them late. When a decision was made at the Pana Corridor Nexus, a remote colony might not hear about it for several cycles. When crisis struck, relief could take days, sometimes much longer. That distance created isolation, but it also created something else: self-reliance. The frontier colonies learned to solve their own problems. They couldn't afford to wait. By the time help arrived, the crisis might already be over. So every colony built its own engineering team, its own energy network, its own emergency procedures, its own traditions, its own way of surviving. Many historians now believe that the galaxy's greatest diversity was born in these distant worlds. As the great centers became more standardized, the colonies became more unique, and over time, that diversity would become one of the galaxy's greatest strengths. One journal, still preserved within the Central Archive, ends with these words: "From here, the galaxy looks unimaginably vast. But from the galaxy's point of view, how small must we appear? And does being small make us unimportant? No, because every morning our sun still rises, and every day we continue to live. Perhaps that is only a very small achievement in a very large galaxy, but it is a real achievement nonetheless." And so, we arrive at the end of this record. Although, perhaps, the end is not the right word, because galactic history never truly ends. One record simply closes, so another can begin. This archive is the memory of the galaxy. Every chapter preserves more than an event. It preserves a person, a decision, a single moment. Some of these records were carved into data crystals. Some survived damaged. Some remain incomplete. Some are still hotly disputed. Yet when all of these fragments are brought together, they form something far greater, a mosaic. Each piece by itself appears incomplete, but together they reveal not where the galaxy is going. They reveal where it came from. And perhaps knowing where we came from is more valuable than anything else, because the future will always remain uncertain. But the past, if it is preserved with honesty, can still guide us. The galaxy will make mistakes. The galaxy will face new crises. The galaxy will disagree with itself again and again. But if it can return to these records, if each generation chooses to learn from those who came before, then it will never need to begin again. It will simply continue. At the entrance to the Central Archive, the very first page of this record carries a single inscription. Today, it hangs upon the wall of the archive's most visited hall. This archive was not created to imprison the past. It was created to illuminate the future. May everyone who reads these words remember that. The galaxy is still learning a little more every day. And perhaps there is no greater sentence that history could ever write. At the end of every great archive, there is usually an invisible hand. Someone who recorded it, someone who organized it, someone who protected it. This record is no different. The team responsible for compiling this section of the Central Archive never placed their own identities at the center of the story, because their duty was not to be heard. Their duty was to preserve not their own opinions, but the events, not their own voices, but the voices of the past. Let this final note be their only personal trace. An archivist faces history every day. Damaged crystals, unreadable records, contradictory testimonies, forgotten names, missing dates, and sometimes only a single sentence. No author, no explanation, no clear reason for why it was written. And yet, somehow, hundreds of cycles later, it remains. Reading such fragments can be exhausting, sometimes inspiring, sometimes deeply sorrowful, because behind them there were real people, real decisions, real fears, real hopes. Galactic history is not abstract. It is a single line written inside the logbook of an exploration vessel. It is a cold cup of coffee spilled across a conference table after hours of argument. It is an engineer on a distant colony telling their child, "Yes, we will be able to go home." This archive carries all of them, and everyone who reads it, whether they realize it or not, becomes another link in that chain. The galaxy is waiting for you. Central Archive Department, History and Documentation Unit. Record number 001. Closed. Please refer to the archive system for the next record. Appendix: Archive Notes and Disputed Records. This appendix contains additional notes from the Central Archive, as well as ongoing historical debates regarding several events referenced throughout the main record. On the date of the first contact. The exact date of the first contact remains a subject of debate. Different civilizations used different calendar systems. Even after the adoption of the Galactic Standard Time System, the discrepancy could not be fully resolved. Depending on the conversion model, the event may be placed hundreds of cycles apart. The Central Archive maintains a simple position. The uncertainty of the date does not diminish the importance of the event. History is remembered not because of when it happened, but because of what it changed. The Silent Crown Investigations. The investigations referenced within this record continued for far longer than described here. Although many documents remain classified, several researchers have suggested that signs of activity may have continued within the Silent Crown even after the Great Halt. These claims have never been officially confirmed, nor officially denied. The Central Archive's position remains unchanged. The investigation is ongoing. The missing records of Station 47. Why so few records from Station 47 have survived remains unknown. The official explanation points toward damaged data crystals, the data fires, and long-term archival deterioration. Some historians, however, argue that portions of the archive were deliberately removed. Today, this theory remains outside mainstream historical consensus. Even so, The Central Archive has never attempted to suppress such discussions, because an archive should preserve not only established facts, but also the questions that remain unanswered. The founding date of the Galactic Industrial Bureau. Assigning a single founding date to the Galactic Industrial Bureau is impossible. Some historians recognize the day its founding charter was officially signed. Others point to the first Grand Assembly. Still others argue that the Bureau was truly born only when it became operational. This debate is more than an academic exercise, because the founding date shapes the legal and historical legitimacy of the Bureau itself. The Central Archive remains neutral, recognizing that each proposed date represents a different stage in the evolution of one institution. Suggestions regarding this archive may be submitted to the Public Communications Office of the Central Archive. All feedback will be reviewed during the next archive revision cycle. GIB Historical Commission. Open Archive Publication number 001-A.